Chiefs are normally playing this time of year, not so much this year. A lot to talk about today on Locked On Chiefs.
From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
And welcome back to another episode of Locked On Chiefs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Thank you for listening. We really do appreciate it. We are the number one sports podcast network in the U.S. We do appreciate that as well. Thank you for making us your first listen. Go check out another Locked On show, maybe Locked On NFL. A lot of stuff to talk about when we start getting into the coaching carousel. What is going on in the NFL right now? The playoffs are still ongoing as we are recording this. This is a live show before the Texans and the Steelers kick off, so something to watch there. But today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel is officially in playoff mode. Every game day during the NFL playoffs, FanDuel is giving customers even more ways to get in on the action. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Today, we're going to be talking about interest in Steve Spagnolo and how there doesn't seem to be a ton right now, at least from what we've heard. Some of the coaching changes around the NFL and that are going on for the Chiefs. In the next segment, we're going to start talking about the playoffs and Matt Nagy right now. I am Chris Clark from Chiefs Corner, and you can find me over there. Going to be talking a lot about this team and going to be talking about a lot about the salary cap here in just a little bit. A big story coming out about the salary cap, and we'll actually talk about this in just a second. My partner, Ryan Tracy from NFL 33, RGR Football, and Rogue Analytics, my partner in crime for going on getting ready to start what? This will be season number 10. We almost don't have enough
season number 10.
Fingers, yeah. Yeah. We don't have enough fingers for that very soon. But when we look at this, and one of the things when we're talking about playoffs, Matt Nagy, one of the bigger things that I will be talking about on Chiefs Corner, and I just want to start this here because I think it goes into how things are going to play out for this roster in 2026. One of the biggest stories in the NFL right now is the Eagles lost. And the Eagles have something like $427 million in void years between now and 2033. Kansas City's in the top 5, I think, of that list at $120 million in void years. So that's interesting, but not the way that this roster has generally been built. And I would say most of that void year stuff with the Chiefs is probably mostly Patrick Mahomes. But you start looking at the playoffs and how this is playing out. Chargers lost kind of in poor fashion, too. I really don't know what to make of that game. They just couldn't do anything offensively. And I know their offensive line struggled, but, man, that was brutal to watch.
Yeah, it was difficult. Not what you had hoped if you're a Chargers fan. I think most Kansas City fans probably had a smile on their face. I do think that this culmination of years and years and years of everybody picking them to win the West, and then the one time the Chiefs haven't won it in the last decade, they don't win it either. So I think it does come to fruition, the fact that every team changes every year, and just because you think you've been close before doesn't mean you will be again. I actually, in the way that it went down and who won in the AFC, I do think kind of lends itself to seeing the Broncos at least get a win. I don't know that I'll be rooting for it because I actually want to see someone else win, but want and what will happen are two very, very different things.
That's true. And the big question is when you start looking at how this is going to play out without knowing the Texans and the Steelers, which is going on a little bit later after the show is going to be done recording. So we don't know who the Patriots are going to be playing yet. We do know the Broncos are going to be playing the Bills, but the Bills have a ton of injuries that they're dealing with from this last game. The question is can Bo Nix actually show up and do something well in the playoffs and get that offense going? They're going to have a challenge. Obviously, Josh Allen is a fantastic quarterback. I think that's going to be an interesting game. But you look at what the Chargers are dealing with. They lost their left tackle early in the season. They lost their right tackle. Word came out that Alt is dealing with basically everything in the ankle. Basically went wrong on his ankle. He's out for, I think I heard 4 months. That's an interesting time frame when you start looking at how that's going to play out for the offseason program and whatnot. Obviously, he should be fine for training camp, but it's still something to watch there. But when you look at how this is going to work out with Matt Nagy, I mean, the other thing you start hearing, I didn't even know Nagy was going to get an opportunity to interview for the Baltimore Ravens job. That hasn't been something that we had seen. And then all of a sudden it gets reported that he interviewed for the Baltimore Ravens job.
I mean, all the way across, Matt Nagy is being affected by what I am calling the Harbaugh cloud. I do think it has put a bit of a kibosh on the Giants' opportunity for both the Chiefs coordinators. And it certainly has put another wrinkle into, yes, there's another opening. But I do think that Harbaugh is going to be very, very high on the list in Tennessee, as well as Nagy already was. So I think it's affecting him on both ends of the job search here.
Yeah, and it's crazy because you start looking at what it's going to mean. Harbaugh hasn't really even told the teams which teams he will be interviewing for. There's also crazy news. Green Bay lost to the Bears. There's speculation on the Locked On podcast, Locked On Packers podcast, that maybe LaFleur is going to get traded. He is a free agent, it sounds like, this offseason. So when you start talking about coaching carousel and different teams that have availability and who's going to be available, you have to wonder how that's going to play out, because it's going to affect everything. I still think in the end, it doesn't really matter for the Chiefs at the offensive coordinator position, because Nagy isn't going to be back. I will say that point blank, period. He will not be back in Kansas City as the offensive coordinator in 2026. He's not under contract, and it doesn't sound like Kansas City is really even interested in bringing him back. And he definitely has made it sound like, at least through his agents, that he does not want to come back, because he wants to be at a place where he can call it a place if he doesn't get a head coaching opportunity.
Yeah, and honestly, for his career, that's what he needs. It's difficult when you bounce back from a head coaching gig. A lot of guys will go back to their side of the ball in coordinating. But if you're not calling the plays, and if you're not clearly the guy in charge of that play calling side of the ball, it makes it difficult for you to get another bite at the apple. Now, obviously, the Titans and the Bears have GMs that know Matt Nagy very well. I think that helps them along, but it doesn't preclude anything, to tell you the truth. And so for him, whether it's a head coaching job or another OC job, he's got to get to the point where it's his offense. And I think that's the overriding theme here.
Yeah, and I think he'll get the opportunity somewhere. The question is going to end up being where. But at this point, the other part of this that really plays out to me that's interesting is, and we're going to talk about coaching changes that are coming as well in the next segment. But the other interesting thing is we haven't heard anything. Kansas City's been out of it for a week now. Haven't heard anything about them having any offensive coordinator interviews at this point. Kind of surprised about that a little bit. Wonder if that means that they're looking at somebody that is still going in the playoffs, or if they're just we're not going to hear anything. That's also possible. And one other quick update, since we already talked about salary cap, it looks like the Chiefs salary cap situation is even worse, because now they've signed some of their undrafted free agent guys, or their guys to fill out the roster. They're at negative 60 million almost in salary cap space for 2026. And I was looking at this today. How crazy is it that the projected salary cap is now just under $300 million? Like, I never
that's going to be
thought
huge.
That.
I wouldn't have either. It's going to be epic, especially for this team. And we should probably just say that, folks, tomorrow we're going to address that and break down the cap here and what we're looking at. But it all goes into how you pair up players with coaches. It's going to be a long, long battle here. But next, we're going to get into some of the other coaching changes around Kansas City that's going to affect everything. As all the dominoes line up, pretty soon they're going to start falling. Who goes first? We'll tell you that next. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Whether you're starting a new routine or jumping into player projections for the first time, trying something new can feel like a challenge. But with Prize Picks, it always feels good to be right. With high-pressure football matchups every weekend and elite hoops actions almost every night, the action never slows down, and Prize Picks lets you stay in control. Prize Picks is the daily fantasy app that makes watching sports events even more exciting by letting you build lineups based on player projections. No drafts, no waiting, just pick more or less and play your way. Getting started on Prize Picks is quick and simple. The app is super easy to navigate. You can get to whatever you're looking for, NFL, NBA, etc. Super, super simple, and that makes it easy. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after your first $5 lineup goes up. At Prize Picks, it's good to be right. Nobody knows your money goals better than you. Robinhood puts you in control of your money with tools that work as hard as you do, locking in every opening, beating your PR, and beating it again. Channel that drive into your money. Robinhood puts you in control of your money. Trade stocks and EFTs, options, futures, and crypto all in one platform. You can now build and execute your own trades from a desktop with Robinhood Legends advanced tools, or take advantage of the new Robinhood strategies with a tailored portfolio managed by a team of experts. You expect more from yourself, expect more from your money. Get started today at robinhood.com/yourmoney. Again, that's robinhood.com/yourmoney. Your money, your move.
So many coaching changes are going to be happening across the NFL over the next couple of weeks. And we are here to talk about one that honestly needed to happen probably a year ago, if not before that, it sounds like. But I'll let you go ahead and break it down.
Well, first, like domino to fall on the Chiefs staff is Connor Embry was let go. And more importantly, I think the term is that it wasn't a renewed contract. It lets Connor Embry go get another opportunity, maybe one that's better suited to his talents. And I think it lets the Chiefs reset a position they've made a lot of investment in between Xavier, Rice. Got to get more out of that group. Got to get progression out of that. Now Tyquan Thornton coming in, obviously Jalen Royals. I expect you're going to see another draft pick in that position room this season. You have to be able to not just rely and enhance what their natural abilities are. You have to enhance everything else, because that old saying that the weakest link in the chain is what will bring you down, that is true for a wide receiver as well. If you can't clean up your route running, if you can't get out of your breaks, if you can't hide your stem to keep that DB on his heels, there are things that will catch up with you. And that skill set, at least the development of those skill sets, has been what's been lacking lately. I think it was smart. I agree. It probably could have been a year ago. But what's really interesting to me is we've seen no update of a replacement at this point, which goes back to when we were talking earlier. It makes me a little bit nervous that there isn't a clear-cut way to go here. And the longer any of these open positions stick around, the more likely it is Andy just promoting from within and we get more of the same in a slightly different configuration.
I disagree with that to an extent. I get where you're coming from, but the reason I disagree is because I think that it's possible that they've got either an offensive coordinator that they want that's still in the playoffs, or that just got done with the playoffs, because it just did happen. So it's possible they'll get that figured out. I honestly, if I'm Kansas City, like, I understand the thought process of maybe wanting to have somebody in the waiting to take that position. But to me, if I'm Kansas City and I know I'm changing my offensive coordinator, why bother trying to fill that position right now? Wait and get an offensive coordinator and then see if there's somebody that they have in mind and that you can bring with them that maybe will be somebody that will give them a little bit more continuity in the offense and a little bit more buy-in in the offense because they have their own guy kind of as that position coach. So to me, I look at it from that perspective. I think this was a long overdue move. I think that Rashee Rice, I think, had a good rookie season, but not necessarily. And it looked like he was going to have a fantastic year too, but Xavier Worthy hasn't really developed. And obviously there's partially some of the injury involved in that. But it also goes back to, look at what you had with Hollywood Brown. Obviously he missed all of 2024. I get that. Came back and really didn't have any kind of impact in 2025. There's questions and there's people that are talking. I've seen multiple different people on X talking about how some of the wide receivers were getting information from the veterans and from Kelsey versus getting it from the coach himself. And that's a problem. I never did understand why you had a guy that didn't play the position coaching the position, not somebody that didn't play in the NFL or at a very high level, at least in college, doing that position. And that goes kind of the same for the running back room. And I think that you can make an argument in the running back room. Why do you have a wide receiver as the running back coach? And here's the other side of that for me, and the argument that I will make on that. I would be okay if they move the running back coach to wide receiver. At least you feel like you have continuity, a guy that played in the NFL Granted, it's not necessarily the wide receiver coach I'd want, but it would still be a step in the right direction.
I agree with you there, and it does make natural sense. I will say that Andy's always done a very good job about expanding the horizons of his staff. So if you came in with experience at a position, like Eric Bieniemy, who was a running back and spent the majority of his career as a running backs coach, including right now in Chicago, I do think that giving him opportunity to coach other positions as a growth factor is important. And you want to develop an offensive coordinator. Not every offensive coordinator is a receivers coach. A lot of them come from the quarterback ranks. A lot of them come from all over the place. There are even offensive coordinators that have been offensive line coaches. So that development path has to be there. But the fact that you don't recognize that no one is making progression for multiple seasons, that is the problem for me, because Todd Pinkston, I think, could move over and coach wide receivers. Does that help his career? Probably not. It's definitely a lateral move, but it's a comfort move. What it does help is your product on the field. And at this point, that's what's most important, because every season you waste of Patrick Mahomes' career is on you for not making that decision. Now, there are plenty of candidates out there. I really hoped that somebody like Brian Hartline would come up during the conversation. When we were back in the fall, he recently took a head coaching position in college. He's not going to waver off of that. So in my mind, what was option one to really enliven the wide receiver room is off the table. But there are plenty of other guys out there. It's a question of comfort, and what Andy's going to do in making room for one coach doesn't mean that he's going to cut another. I don't expect Todd Pinkston at this point to be let go.
And maybe he won't, but I would also wonder, is there going to be other moves? And is this going to be a situation? And again, I guess now I'm rethinking it. I kind of disagree with what you just said, because I'm not so sure that when you get the offensive coordinator position, you don't have a reset at multiple different positions. Pinkston could get let go. The reality is that you finished the season 6-11. One of the worst seasons this team has had in over a decade. Obviously, Andy Reid came here, completely changed the culture, completely changed how things were going. And to go 6-11, I'm not going to say he needs to be fired. That's not at all where I'm going to go with that. You had a lot of injuries. You had a lot of different things. But the problem is you had a team that never lived up to the expectations of what this team should have been and could have been based on the players that they had. And that's the real problem. You didn't see development at the wide receiver position. Rashee Rice took a step back from where I think he was even as a rookie to an extent. And part of that is coming off the injury. I get that. Xavier Worthy didn't seem to progress. And game planning didn't make sense in a lot of ways, because Tyquan Thornton, who started the season, I'm not going to say hot, but at least lukewarm maybe, disappeared. Yeah. Where did he go the rest of the season? Like, there were so many things that didn't make sense to me when it came to usage and how this offense worked throughout the entire season. I think you got to figure that out. And you have to really look at it and say, we need to make some major changes. Will they do that is really going to end up being the question. And I'm not sure if they do or they don't. But if you don't, you leave yourself in a situation where you have this opportunity right now to do something that you won't probably have next season. Because right now, you don't even know if Patrick Mahomes is going to be able to start the regular season. If he can't, how does that affect what you're going to be doing in 2026 and 2027? Because it's going to have an effect on all of it.
It certainly is. And I think all of those things come together to make the necessity what it needs to be. And the clock is ticking. For all but 8 teams, 10 teams at this point, those coaches aren't available. They're available right now. If you're going to fill them, you should be filling those spots right now. You can't wait to hope the offensive coordinator can bring his staff with him, because that's not the way that it generally is going to work at that point if you're waiting on a playoff contender. So there are other teams that have to wait. You have to be one of them. Use the aggression. For the first time in 10 years, you've been able to do that now while the playoffs are ongoing. Steve Spagnolo is taking advantage of it. Who's most interested in him and who isn't next?
The wild card round is here, and FanDuel is officially in playoff mode. Every game day during the NFL playoffs, FanDuel is giving customers even more ways to get in on the action, because right now, every NFL playoff game day, FanDuel users get a profit boost pack waiting for them inside the app. Each game day, you'll see a pack loaded with multiple profit boosts you can apply to the bets you like the most. Open your profit boost pack first thing on game day and see what boosts you want to apply. The boost lets you lean into your game day instincts, whether you're backing momentum, defense, quarterback play, or coaching. The boost gives you more juice on bets you already like instead of forcing you to bet something new. Every play feels bigger, and the boosts make your bets feel that way too. You make your picks, then apply profit boost to go after even bigger payouts while the playoffs get rolling. So visit FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL, and grab your profit boost pack every NFL playoff game day. Interest in Steve Spagnolo is waning, maybe? I'm not really sure what to make of it at this point.
It's a tough one. What we thought was going to materialize for Steve Spagnolo was going to be a market that I think was going to lean heavily towards experience. Two of those jobs now, it doesn't look like that's coming his way. I thought the Giants were going to lean into that. I thought that the Ravens, once they let Harbaugh go, and he became probably option number one for the Giants, that would lean towards a Spagnuolo type in Baltimore. That doesn't seem to be working out either. It seems that the Titans, due to Mike Organzi, had the most interest. That interview's been concluded. We haven't heard any ramifications from it at all. And it seems like there's not a whole lot of other interest in Steve Spagnolo this particular round. And I think what's really interesting to me is there's one other party that is not interested in Steve Spagnolo right now, and that's Joe Cullen. He is taking interviews. And that is something I had not expected, to tell you the truth. I don't know that that's anything that we have to be earth-shattering about. He has been a DC in the league before, so it is a natural progression to want to return to that role, and people will come calling. But I do think it's something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, and it's going to be curious to see what they're going to do if Cullen does take another job. Spagnuolo, if he stays in Kansas City, obviously would have to find a new D-line coach if Cullen goes elsewhere. This brings into the question, who are you going to get there? What are you going to do at the defensive line position? We kind of talked about that a little bit on Friday's show. It's a question of what are you going to do with Chris Jones, because that's the big marquee person. And we're going to have a little bit of a conversation when we start talking about the cap space in tomorrow's show, because that is one of the biggest things going into the offseason with him is I think he's got a $45 million cap number in 2026. You can't have him play on that. I don't care that it's a $300 million salary cap. You can't have him play on that number. You're going to have to address that. And obviously Patrick Mahomes will have to be addressed as well. So that plays into all of it. But the reality is and we can talk about this a lot more tomorrow. I say all of that to say this. The defensive line position group was very underwhelming in 2026 or 2025, sorry. And you have to do better in 2026. George Karlaftis isn't going anywhere. You signed into a long-term deal. He is going to be here in some way, shape, or form. There are other moves you can make, but we have been saying for, I don't want to say the better part of a decade, but at least the better part of 3 years, if not 4, that they needed to fundamentally change that grouping, and they haven't. And now you're in a situation where if Joe Cullen leaves, how does that change everything?
That's the real question. Now, I do think that there is one particular candidate out there on the defensive side that the Chiefs have had some exposure to, that knows Steve Spagnolo well. And if Steve Spagnolo isn't going anywhere, it makes a whole lot of sense. And the thing that I like about this option is that he does bring an edge. And the edge is what that group needs. They have been suspect in their motivation, their aggression, and their ability to perform since Frank Clark left. Let's be honest. There has been Chris Jones and there has been Chris Jones. So at this point, if Antonio Pierce comes onto this staff and there's a hole at defensive line, I could see that being an option because he has obviously the linebacker experience, but he's been a DC as well. And so even though that would be a position change, that could work.
Do you think that it has to do with the person that's the leader of that group? Or do you think it's just that they don't have that guy? Because right now, Jones is your leader, and his attitude is never been a Frank Clark type where he is a shark. And I'm not faulting Chris Jones for that, because his ability gives him the ability to do things the way he wants to, and he is fantastic. Generally speaking, he has been fantastic for this team. Didn't have a great year in 2025. You'd hope that gets better in 2026. but he doesn't have that killer instinct that Frank Clark has. And I wonder if that's something that you've absolutely been missing for the past couple of years, and you have to have somewhere.
I think you absolutely do. I think you're dead on. Chris is a more jovial kind of like keep it relaxed type dude. You don't have to worry about overemphasis when Chris Jones is around because he's going to keep it light. He's going to keep guys focused and loose. But you do have to worry about that killer instinct, and that is absent and has been absent for years. A coach can bring that. Antonio Pierce will challenge you. Go ask Max Crosby. He will put that boot where you don't want it. And I do think that is something that this group, including Chris Jones, needs.
Yeah. And it'd be interesting when you bring up Antonio Pierce, because obviously this goes back to a little bit of an argument of what we just talked about when it comes to the offense, with a positional coach that didn't play the position coaching that position. I will say, though, Pierce has been a coordinator, so you feel a little bit better about that because he's had the grand scheme of everything. He's been a full head coach too, so that plays into it. But I would also say he is on a different level than a guy like Pinkston would be, even because Pinkston was a NFL wide receiver. He wasn't no shot at him, but he wasn't like a Pro Bowl wide receiver or a regular Pro Bowl wide receiver or a great wide receiver. Pierce was a fierce linebacker and somebody that you feared and somebody you had to game plan for. I would not say that Pinkston was that as his position when he played.
That's fair. I don't think that the level of your player success, I don't think is necessarily what drives your success as a coach, but certainly is something to lay back on. It certainly is an aspect of respect that you get from your player group. And I think that's one of the things that Connor Embry was lacking, to tell you the truth. You don't have that gravitas when you're coaching young guys if you haven't done it.
Yeah. There's so many questions when it comes to the coaching staff, how this is going to play out, what Kansas City is going to do, and how they're going to find somebody to fill their need at that coaching position. I'm going to be very curious to see how that ends up. Thank you all for listening today. That's going to be it for us. We're going to talk about the salary cap, how this team is going to get structured, and dive into one of the biggest questions that you have to figure out for the a couple of big questions when you talk about Mahomes and Chris Jones in the salary cap conversation. That's going to be tomorrow. Thank you all for listening today, and we will talk to you then.